didn't start the video, so that's gonna be bad. Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And I am here once again in year 10 with somebody that should have been introduced to this mic a while ago. And you all are going to get a couple of people like that throughout this year 10. And that's the cool thing about being 10 years in the game of this. So go back, check the archives. And when you check the archives, a lot of people I've interviewed before, some of the stories overlap. Definitely with this brother here. So in the world of activism, in the world of artistry, so those are big arcs, and so much more. And then also, like a lot of folks, you know what I'm saying? He definitely keeps some Detroit swag and Detroit perspective with it. Omari King Wise Barksdale, how are you today?
I'm good, brother. It's an honor to be here. Thank you. Always admire you. Always admire the work you do, and it's a privilege to be here today with you. Yeah.
Thank you. So with this, we had an interesting pregame conversation because, like I say, you connect on so many levels in a lot of things of artistry and activism, which kind of ties into like the wings of politics, community organizing, black empowerment, which black empowerment should be a part of everything you do for black folks, just period, you
absolutely.
know. And then also for those that get this stuff confused, black empowerment does not mean to down any other group. It just means that I am empowering my people, you know.
Yeah.
So with that artistry, poetry, spoken word poetry, hip hop, but in that you've also supported fashion, dance, like, and really for a while, I don't know if people kind of know this combination and connection. The spoken word scene was uplifting a little bit of the food scene in Detroit for a while because new spots was like, all right, man, we need something on during the week. What do we do, man? Get some poets in here.
Yeah.
Some poets in here was like you. Legacy, Phoenix, some other folks, Sparrow, rest in peace. To some of the legends in this. So as we get into this discussion, let's start with your Detroit roots. How deep do your family go back to the city of Detroit?
Wow. So if I were to say, generationally speaking, I am third generation Detroit.
Wow.
On both my mother and father's side.
Wow. Okay, so that's real deep.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back from where? Let's go father's side first. Where from?
So this is gonna get crazy. I'm gonna tell you this right now. So my father's father was from like a central, maybe close, like that border between central and southern Alabama.
Okay.
His mother, my grandmother, was from Birmingham. And not only was she from Birmingham, as a result of a sexual assault of her mother, I am the third cousin of George Wallace. The racist Jim Crow governor from Alabama, Alabama at that time.
For people don't know, George Wallace, beyond racist governor, but let's bring this more contemporary for folks to know the history of George Wallace. George Wallace is segregation now, segregation later.
Yeah.
You know, he is the governor that his bigoted, segregationist, racist views that were openly known toppled the economy of Alabama during the Montgomery bus boycott. And that Montgomery bus boycott was so effective that the whole state of Alabama ran out of money.
Yep.
So, like, when people talk about the organizing, the civil rights, and it being docile and ineffective and things like that, I mean, studying some of the works of the way that the brothers and sisters organized and specifically did that, as that's really what I'm interested in, because it was very intricate throughout the whole. It started in Montgomery, and it even reverberated throughout most of the South, but definitely all in Alabama, as it was always known that the Alabama bus situation was tough. Shout out Nick Speed. He did this. He cut a record for me from a record that a blues artist made, like "Don't Ride That Alabama Bus."
Oh wow!
before everything happened with the bus boycott. But George Wallace was the one that was sitting in the seat as governor, begging the American government, please bail us out because we are not making the money. So the
Exactly.
amount of effective carpooling, and really, you know, you got to think about the brothers. Like I say, this is where I would love to do like the documentary with some plays in it, or even a theatrical feature or a play or something, because that's a whole lot to say. All right, we're boycotting. Primarily back then, just due to sexism and everything, it's mostly men that worked. So you the man that worked, that got a vehicle for you and your family, and now usually it's going to be your wife that's going to share the responsibility of driving these other brothers to work.
Yeah.
So then you got to check these brothers so that they, you know what I'm saying? Like this is it was a lot of collective unity and collective goals connected to this, because people knew we're not riding the bus, but you also had to implement other options.
Right.
And that lasted for years to topple. I mean this, meaning Alabama was in a huge deficit to the point where the rest of the states was like, you need to just go on and break.
No doubt.
And it meant a whole lot because George Wallace was one of the most staunch segregationists.
Yeah, him and Lester Maddox and a couple I can't think his name right now. But yeah, I mean, and that was our first truest. I think that's still the blueprint for boycotting on a corporate level that is used now.
And I don't think it's been as effective of like a pressure point. Like a lot of this was strategic. Like when people say Rosa Parks wasn't the first, no, she was not. It was very strategic.
It was a system.
It was planned. It was an effective economic act of war.
Absolutely.
That our people executed very effectively, to the fact that I believe that led to the Civil Rights Bill, because the rest of the states were looking like, well, damn, if they did that to them.
Right. Right. Yeah.
We don't want no part. Mississippi was sitting on the side like, look, we don't want no parts of this. Hence the Dixiecrats eventually switch over and become Republican. Like it's a lot of things historically.
Bull Connor is the name I was trying to think of. Yeah.
And man, a lot of stuff historically, even like it kind of ties to our current president now. That's why it's always weird, because Strom Thurmond was also one of the biggest people that followed George Wallace. And I don't know if people know the relationship between our current president and Strom Thurmond. That was very strong.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not disparaging and supporting one or the other. I'm just acknowledging the fact that the systemic racism that exists in the rhetoric and bigotry and the industry that exists there existed then and now.
Yeah.
But it's ways to shift that, as you know.
That old cliche. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, man.
You know, in some of our exhibits, we started out with a Klan hood. The actual Klan hood, and we ended with a MAGA hat.
Hilarious.
So, and everything in between gives that context. But yeah, I guess so. I guess I made a misstatement. I guess I'm really second generation Detroiter, because my grandparents weren't born in Detroit.
But you were the third here.
I was the third here.
So
my grandmother, my mother's side.
Okay, so in Alabama roots, as I often say, those are like some heavy Detroit roots.
Yeah.
So from Alabama and escaping, usually I'm used to the brothers saying like, look, my grandfather was escaping lynching, similar to the Coleman Young story and everything.
Yeah.
But a grandmother escaping the horrors of that type of sexual assault, that's something that
my great grandmother. Yes.
Great grandmother.
Yes.
So in this story, connecting to coming to Detroit, what was it that led them to Detroit versus other places? Though a lot of Alabama folks were, in Detroit.
So that's one thing I've heard a few different theories of. So I don't know if I have a specific answer for that.
Yeah.
I do know that once they got here and they were married, they did open Kennedy's restaurant on Hamilton, right?
Hamilton and what?
Over by Webb area. Yeah, so we had I grew up like working the penny candy counter at my grandfather's and grandmother's restaurant. You know what I mean? So, which was beautiful because I learned a lot from that. And it's funny because my father's parents traveling not together. I believe, from my understanding, they met here. It's a much different story from my grandparents on my mother's side.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So, but definitely, I do know my grandmother in Birmingham had a lot of issues because she was seen as white because of her light skin,
Complexion. Yeah.
and she was never black enough for the black community, never white enough for the white community. And it was really tough for her to exist down there.
And then also, I'm sure for George Wallace to end up governor, his family probably had a lot of affluence and influence then.
Absolutely.
And it was probably known. So it's not like it's already in the back of a lot of people's minds, some of that already in some of the interactions that what she was dealing with.
And I'm just getting some of this story, right, just in recent years.
Yeah.
So this isn't something I grew up with knowledge of. So I'm still delving into, with as much sensitivity as I can, into some things that may still be a source of pain for certain family members.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm being delicate with it, to honor everybody.
The right legacy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely that reality, as we see that our community are many shades.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And the root of that definitely comes from many of the horrors that women have faced, black women have faced since being a part of, as Cornel West would say, this American experiment.
Yeah.
Even before it was even named America, because that's the other thing I like to always share with people, that we were enslaved before America's 1777. You know, it was a lot of years that created America becoming America.
Before George Washington.
Exactly.
You know.
Where, that's why George Washington had many enslaved people working alongside him for a lot of the works.
Absolutely.
But
I do want to honor my mother's side, which is the side that really raised me.
Okay.
My grandmother is from North Buxton, Ontario.
North Buxton, Ontario.
Which is about 45 minutes once you cross over to Windsor here in Detroit, into Canada, which is the highest underground railroad stop. It's just south of Dresden, which is where Uncle Tom's Cabin is. It's by Chatham, Ontario. But
I was going to say Chatham.
North Buxton was a heavy location for John Brown and Harriet Tubman to funnel people through to this particular underground railroad location, North and South Buxton. And every year, Labor Day weekend, we do our family reunion there. And it's called homecoming, because it's not just our family reunion, which my family still meets on the property at the houses that my family built, right? But 30,000 people come to North Buxton, many from the United States, because that's their heritage, that's their history, or because they want to be a part of it. And we have a museum there. So you can go in the museum and you can read my entire family tree. And you can go sit in the the schoolhouse in the seat where my grandmother and her sisters received their education.
Wow.
We can go to the church where they prayed. We can go to the cemetery where generations of my family is buried.
So with this, that means that your family went on the pilgrimage of the Underground Railroad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of my great level grandmothers, from what I'm told, gave birth at Second Baptist Church before crossing over to Canada.
Wow, ain't that something?
So, now my grandfather, on the other hand, the grandfather I knew as my grandfather, who died when I was 9, he was from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, right? So he's a Barksdale, which is family with the cars and the hooks, which you're familiar with. And so I didn't know, this is just a quick Easter egg. I didn't know till Bell Hooks died that she was my cousin through that family. So, but the Barksdales are not my biological family. I found out when I was 18 that my real grandfather was Salih Hashim, who is from El Birra, Palestine. So my biological grandfather is Palestinian. Yeah.
Wow.
So on my mother's side, I'm like second generation American. Yeah.
Ain't that something? So a whole lot more. Yeah, your story is, as you say, it definitely goes deep. Detroit
Yeah.
is different.
Yeah.
So I like it. And Palestinian, so that's even heavier. So freedom fighting has been, and people that took the Underground Railroad, damn, you got some fire in your veins, my brother.
I mean, and the connections go heavy because my mother didn't know her biological father. She didn't even know exactly where he was from. We found out when my mother was actually dying. My niece did a DNA kit, and we discovered her siblings. And, we did the history with them. And she was in a coma, so she never got to hear the story.
Wow.
But my grandfather was he grew up going to a mosque. Now, she didn't know, she knew his name. That's all she knew about him. He went to a mosque, the biggest mosque in El Birra at the time, called the Omari Mosque. I think it's El Omari Mosque, right? So my name is the name, which is a rare name, is the name of the mosque my grandfather went to.
That is rare. That is.
It is not connected to him.
Yeah, I was gonna say that is some serendipity if it ever existed.
Yeah.
Also given some history, you spoke of Chatham and North Buxton. Those are places that we know more so. Like you can find being in Detroit. Detroit is right. It's an international border crossing. Actually, one of the busiest port when it comes to a lot of shipping and cargo. But also Windsor, Ontario is right there.
Yep.
So this was a passage for many through the Underground Railroad.
Absolutely.
Even I forget when we had the 1440 studio. I forget that cathedral that was on the corner that Pastor Womack had at the time. But like it's other artifacts, and even Second Baptist has it where like it would be caskets where that would ship, and then under bodies would be, and you be let out, like where people would be living. Like it was a lot of tactical strategies that went into the Underground Railroad.
Absolutely. It was a whole system. It was a government. When you think about it. It required leadership. It required agreements, covenants.
Yes.
It required foot soldiers and thinkers and think tanks, and it was a government.
It was no cell phone app of you come in and you not. It was a vetting system. And then it still relied on so many people that played a role on the plantation being there too.
Yep.
And in support of the people making that passage towards freedom. And then also, even in Canada, it's not like many iterations of the Black experience. It's not like you get to Canada and Canada's giving you a new house,
you still have to
a new
figure
car,
it out. You have to figure it out.
Figure out a lot. So some of those families, the ingenuity and the brilliance in a whole new climate, because I mean, think about it. Y'all done been to Alabama, Atlanta. Imagine now going to Toronto.
The beauty of it is, as horrible as slavery was to us, for the first time, because we were builders and agricultural engineers before slavery.
Definitely.
So for the first time in generations, people left the plantation. They were the first in generations of their bloodline left the plantation, were able to build and grow for themselves. So they didn't have to figure out how to build. They didn't have to figure out how to grow. They did have to figure out the new climate.
Yeah, the climate, the people, the culture.
Yeah.
and it's come together where you say 30,000. I've heard a little bit about it through it's a comedian that always talks about it, but I'm not aware of everything. But it's interesting that you speak of this and people connecting like what you call it, Tamia and other people.
Yeah,
You
I'm
know.
linked to her familiarly. So yeah.
So so in this background, and then you mentioned on the West Side growing up. That's where your family had a store. What part did they stay in? Because I'm just so used to like Black Bottom.
So
being
Euclid
South.
and Wildermere was the
Euclid
household.
and Wilderman.
That was the household.
When did they? When did your family get the house?
So they had it my entire life.
Your
I
whole
was
life.
born in '73.
Okay.
So I want to say it was probably mid '60s, probably maybe early '60s.
So
Yeah.
some of the first families, I'm guessing, to move that way, and then when did the business?
So the business, once again, was around my entire childhood until I was about, I think, 1989 or 90 is when they closed the restaurant. But the beauty of the restaurant is my grandfather couldn't read or write when he started, So my grandmother was able to, but my grandfather was the person in the restaurant every day. And Doris Biscoe, remember Doris Biscoe, the newscaster? She had a show that used to come on at like 6 a.m. called Learn to Read. So my grandfather learned how to read watching Doris Biscoe's show every morning before work. So he had a successful business before he knew how to read and write. Yeah.
So, and for people that wonder how and where things functioned, back to some of that ingenuity and the brilliance it takes, which I know this sounds so crazy. I'm interacted with a lot of people that we would label as illiterate as well, but the way that it's other levels of brilliance and understanding body language, people, what's happening. Even road signals, like other things are heightened.
Yeah, man. I know great poets that don't know how to read or write. Great poets.
Yeah.
And that's not me promoting not learning how to read and write.
Yeah, but it's a level of your brilliance should not necessarily be limited to some of the ways that we think we usually traditionally label a person brilliant.
Yeah, and we should be able to honor people where they are.
Yes. So the space, and you said Euclid on the West Side over there.
Yeah.
All right, your whole life, and that's not that far from here. So that's like that footprint, or as we call
my father went to Northwestern High School. Yeah.
Northwestern Central Community.
Yeah, my mother went to Central. Yeah. Yeah, my grandmother's family, they lived here in this area.
Okay.
Right.
your
Clements,
mom had it right.
Fairfield, Cortland. That was.
Yeah, your mom had it right. Go Colts. Trailblazers. I'll be on the track like, my mama was a trailblazer. But so being in a community like that, in the richness, and you've seen certain things grow. So that's where your grandfather was, but your parents, were they working in and out the store? What was that? Connection?
My father did.
Okay.
My father did. My mother, we have Barksdale funeral homes on my mother's side, but she didn't work in the funeral home. My mother was a barber.
For real?
Yeah, my mother was a barber for many years.
Okay, what was that like being a barber? Because I know being a woman barber is tough
Yeah.
today, but I know even back then, and some of it is not the oppressive lens I think people look at, like the sexism. It's like when you're the old guy in the shop or you're the woman in the shop, people be thinking, now if you're a woman and you're good, you get a lot of business.
Yeah, that was the thing, right? So my mother got a lot of business, right?
Okay.
And her coworkers, they didn't treat her poorly. Like they treated her pretty as good as they could for the time. I never saw a customer disrespect her. Well, there was one time, and that we won't talk about that on camera.
Ended,
But typically The customers were very respectful. She had a good relationship with them and people in the neighborhood. I went to college and found out how many of my friends in college, like, once we got to talking, my mother was their barber.
Wow.
When my mother passed, Con Davidson realized that he saw my mother's picture and name and didn't realize this whole time that my mother was his barber growing up.
Ain't that something?
You know what I mean? So, yeah.
And what was okay? And why being a barber versus a beautician? I'm wondering because I'm sure she got that question all the time.
Well, I think that when she went to barber school, it was the early 70s. And I think there was some initiatives to help
Get women into the field.
Not just to get women in the field, but to make it affordable. So she did have to pay, but not the exorbitant fees that a lot of people had to pay at that time. And so she just fell right into it. And, so she was a barber, my whole life until 2000 and probably 2008 or 9 when she stopped cutting hair.
What shop did she work out of primarily?
So there was one called Ken's. Most of them were actually on 6 Mile.
Okay.
So we had Ken's. There was another one I can't remember that was right behind my elementary school. I went to J.R. King. It was on, I can't remember the name of that one. And then there was Hands Precision, which we eventually, as a family, took over. And she was the barber. My aunt was a beautician in there. And so as a family, that was family, that was family run.
Okay.
So which was on 6 Mile in Burwood.
Okay, so 6 Mile, you just stand kind of in this hub of West.
Yeah, because at that time I lived on Apple Line and Puritan.
Okay.
So, we grew up on the block with Jalen Rose. You know what I mean?
All right.
So
all right.
I was on Apple Line and Puritan area.
Okay.
Went to, So, and then we eventually moved over Joy Road and Evergreen.
All right, so now I guess let's get into your school journey. You talked a little bit about that, but middle school, high school, where you at?
I went to a lot of middle schools.
Oh,
I went to well, let's talk about the ones I went to for reasonable time. I went to Longfellow, Bobian, and then Lessinger.
Okay, Longfellow, no more. I want to get that property. Detroit is different.
I love
that
man.
to a park.
Longfellow was a critical moment for me. That was I loved. I only went there for a year, but and then for my high school, and big ups to Jessica Caramore, Detroit's new poet laureate. We grew up on the same block. My sister was her best friend. We went to Cody. We all went to Cody High School together.
Oh, you went to Cody?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I came out of Cody in '91. And then Ferris State University.
All right, and let me talk a little bit about Cody too, because even in her story, like Cody's like Northwestern and a couple other schools that have been around for a while. Meaning, like before a lot of the vocations went out to a lot of the vocational schools, you had like a lot of like Cody had like a printing press and like like an engineering robotics lab and all. What was it like in there? And did you know that like okay, this is unique for a high school?
They didn't have any of that when I went there.
Wow.
To my knowledge.
Okay. You just were, because I know Cody had like Cody's like a Northwestern where now it may not have had the teachers.
Yeah.
But a lot of that. But what was your Cody experience like?
So like anybody doing vocational stuff was shipped out.
Oh, to the
at the second half of the day to the Crockett's and
Ray Hops or Randolph.
Yeah. So but to me, Cody, I was heavy ROTC. I was in drama. I didn't play sports for Cody, but I played sports and out, other leagues. But Cody was a good place for me. Because I had a stronghold there. I sent a message pretty early that I wasn't to be played with. So I didn't have a lot of the issues that some of the guys had coming up in Cody. And I from an educational standpoint, I wasn't happy with Cody. But from an environment and socialization standpoint, I feel like I was treated well by other students. And, so it was a good experience in that way.
So in Jessica's interview, she talked a lot about the drama teacher there
Miss Story.
and how the
Love Miss
drama
Story.
teacher connected her to a lot of things. And you mentioned
Yeah.
drama too.
Miss Story made me one summer go to Marcel Marceau School for Mime in Ann Arbor to learn how to be an actor without words, how to be a silent actor. Because many people say that's the best acting is when you're acting without words. So, and I'll never forget that experience because I never would have thought to do it. My mother would have never thought to do it. I went there every week for like 4 weekends. And there's a certain discipline in that. But it also, I think, helped me prepare myself for what would be a poetry career.
And that's interesting because that's kind of Jessica kind of brings up that connection too.
Yeah.
So from Cody to Ferris.
Yeah. But before you do that,
Okay.
I do want to say that while I was there, Jessica had left before me. So while I was there, we transitioned from Miss Story for a while to Miss Kirkland,
Okay.
who was a black woman who brought in and had us do A Raisin in the Sun, where I got to play Walter Lee Younger. So we did Pearlie. And so I had the influence from a white teacher and a black teacher who were both supportive. So I don't want to ever leave out Miss Kirkland because she was an amazing, amazing instructor.
Okay. All right. So Ferris, why Ferris?
So I sat out of school for a year after graduation because my hopes and aspirations to go to FAMU didn't kind of work out the way I hoped they did. And I moved my cousin, Imana Moore, who is a big time human being. She was one of Detroit's, one of Michigan's most influential people a couple years ago, listed as that. She's a nurse at Beaumont. We're the same age. And I was helping her move to school. Her, she was returning back to school after the summer.
Yeah.
So I helped drive her up there and move her stuff in.
To Ferris.
To Ferris.
Okay.
And when I got on campus, I just said, this is where I'm going to be. So, and they were on quarters at the time, 10-week trimesters. Mm-hmm. And when that second 10-week trimester hit, I was enrolled at Ferris. So had I not moved her to Ferris at that time and been in that environment, I probably wouldn't have went there.
So for people that are watching this, so that they know, okay, it's a lot of colleges and universities in America, period. Mm-hmm. Michigan got a bunch of them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's a lot, just the ranking, like, if you ever come to Michigan and it's like, why are they ranking themselves as the number one college and university in Michigan? Because it's a lot of them here. so in them, Ferris State University is a university that is on the western side of the state. It is kind of in the middle of just Ferris State,
Yeah.
The other thing about Ferris State is, I believe some of the tenured professors from everyone that I've talked to that has gone to Ferris have more of a, do I want to say like independent, or I don't know what the right term is, but let's just put it like this. They have a little bit more freedom about how they want to lead what they want to do in classes.
Yeah, they do. Unfortunately, in many cases.
So which leads to some different experiences from people that have gone to Ferris.
Yeah.
Watch my Toby interview if you want to get deep into like how, like, brother from the hood and the D ends up with a professor on the farm, and that's a common story. That's not like out the ordinary at Ferris. But what was your Ferris experience like? What was that connection?
Man, I loved my experience at Ferris. As tough as it was, as tough as they were on black people, once again, like the classroom part, with the exception of a couple of professors, I could really throw it away. But the people I met there, to this day, I have many great friends in my life and godchildren because of Ferris State University bringing us together. I met Khaled at Ferris. We went to school together.
I was naturally about to get into that
Yeah.
question, but you already answered it.
You know, we had professors, black professors like Dr. Jesse Huff, rest in peace, who was very impactful to many of us. I met my cousin Raymond Gant, whose family is from Buxton. He was an administrator over the Office of Minority Affairs at the time. So he was already kind of mentoring me, right? Already showing me, modeling masculinity, manhood in an academic environment to me. And then we found out we were related. And he was from Kalamazoo.
Wow.
So we would not have otherwise probably run into each other, if not at the meeting point being Ferris. Just really rich experiences from leaving class and going fishing in the summer and cooking my own food because I couldn't afford to buy groceries, to relationships developed in intramural sports, and I was refereeing. In fact, one of my homeboys, Sean, is an NFL referee. We refereed together in college.
Wow.
But I learned a lot about writing skills. I learned a lot about, and that's one thing I did take away from the classroom. I learned more about my own humanity because I started an organization, Black, in 1995 that's still going at Ferris. But what 8 black men started that organization. We just lost one, rest in peace, DeJuan Hayes. We lost Tavares Vaughn our first year, rest in peace to him as well. But we had to teach each other how to grow up and how to treat each other and how to create boundaries and how to do community service. And it's not to say my family didn't teach me any community service because they did, but this took us.
But let's frame this, and then I want to get what the acronyms stand for after this. But like anything in life, your child's perspective, and then as you mature into adulthood, taking on what will, because I think teenage years you're challenging usually like the structure of what everything your parents, school, whatever. So then you transition into adulthood. Now you're applying what values I think set in age, and just in my experience and from what I've witnessed in others, like you pick back up on a lot more of that family and other aspects of community, but you still need to have that internal growth. As like the as on the new Rhapsody album, and she says, saying the
Love
N-word,
that album,
I gotta
bro.
look inward. That was a good one, saying the N-word, and I gotta look inward. I was like, this is
Nice.
deep. So what's the acronym stand for, and what led for you all, you think, at that moment saying, okay, we need to be proactive about doing something?
Black leaders aspiring for critical knowledge.
Okay.
There were 8 of us. Alonzo Dinwiddie wanted to start one particular type of organization. I wanted to start an organization. And the other brothers were working on, they were younger than us. They were all freshmen. Alonzo and I were the only ones that weren't freshmen. They wanted to start an organization. And Terry Houston, which is an amazing human being, she put us together and said, I think you all are on the same path. So we sat and talked, and we decided to create this organization that would allow us to exemplify positive images of black men to black women and black children. So we started talking, and we started fighting and arguing, and for months we went through this process of not liking each other and loving each other. And then finally, on February 7th, which is my grandmother's birthday, February 7th, 1995, our paperwork was done, and we were a registered student organization.
That's deep. So in that, so many lessons about getting to a consensus, leadership, listening, knowing how to present your own information. And then, with men, it's going to always have like a little bit of ego machismo. That's just always going to play out. Anytime you get men together, it's going to be that. But even knowing how to navigate that, because we're a part of community. And oftentimes, sometimes in this organizing, because it does lend itself to a lot of women and children, sometimes I feel like men feel displaced or feel burdened with well, if you come in, you gotta, and it's like, damn, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I just was walking into the meeting. I got tasked with 1,000 things for all the brothers that ain't here. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, so it's good that you're learning that. What was the works that you all did while you were on campus, and how have you seen that organization grow since?
So, we started out doing simple things like we would go to the daycare centers. And we would read to the kids.
Okay.
We would go out into the community, and we were listed, and the university targeted us as a black hate group. But what they didn't know is we were going out in the community, which was almost all white, and shoveling snow for elders, white elders.
Yeah.
Because that's all that really was.
Out there, yeah.
And shoveling and raking their leaves.
Wait, time out. Let me say this too. Okay. The other thing about Ferris State on the west side of the state is, I don't know what it is about the west side of the state and those lakes. But the lake effect snow on the west side
crazy.
Of the state.
It's crazy.
Like over here, it's like, man, like you get a foot of snow and you be like, man. Over there, it'd be like 4 feet of snow. Like, man.
And see, we ain't want nobody, like, we weren't doing it to appease white folks. We were doing it because we didn't want to see people getting hurt.
Yeah.
We knew that not only could those people living there get hurt, but students walking to school past those houses, people that lived off campus, could get hurt. We read to kids of all races because we don't care. They're kids.
Yeah.
We want to show them positive examples of black men. We did what I call kick it sessions. And so what we would do is all the black folks that responded would come into one big room, and we would have issues, like different topics, and we talk about them. So every topic we talk about, we had a solution segment, which is what we took. Once we put it on paper, we took it and created our programming from it.
So I'm guessing at the time, you said 95?
Yeah.
So at the time, I'm guessing you all are probably talking definitely like the Million Man March.
Yeah.
You all are probably definitely talking about a little bit of what burgeoning is like the East Coast, West Coast beef.
Yeah.
You all are probably talking like things that are on the hearts and minds of those students along that line of pop culture at the time, but also learning how to lead in groups because, you're in a college, so critical thinking. It's like, okay, I'm gonna challenge the hell out of these.
Yeah, like we had topics like, how do we get the fraternity stuff stop fighting each other? What about the relationship between black men and black women on campus? So we did stuff like on Valentine's Day, we set up a love table where we gave out like roses and stuff to every black woman that passed. You know what I mean? So. Because we were all about unity, right? And our sister organization, YBBW, which preceded us in existence, You Beautiful Black Women, we did a lot with them. And the Deltas gave us, like, crazy support, man. Like, from the beginning, the Deltas really helped us establish our organization. If not for the Deltas, it would have been a much tougher road. So we eventually started doing the Image Awards with the Deltas, and then we continued for years. Yeah.
So in learning this, I think the beauty of it also is that you're seeing the possibility model applied and growth even in yourself of things.
Absolutely.
So during this time, are you coming back to Detroit? What differences are you noticing? Because you say 91, you were kind of here, and I guess 5 years changes a lot of stuff, but.
Yeah.
In that time, I mean, you're basically leaving the throes of the Coleman Young Detroit that you knew your whole life.
Yeah, and walking in the Archer.
Walking into an Archer Detroit, which is completely different. By the time you graduate, it's definitely, and then you lead that organization, I'm sure you thinking like, what the hell is going on in Detroit? Detroit is different. Like, what's the perspective?
So I was keeping up a little bit, right?
Okay.
So when I was in high school, I started out in an organization that was based on peer group counseling called Metropolitan Detroit Youth Foundation. And they absorbed me as a teenager, which I was the first teenager to be on the board of directors.
Interesting.
So on the board of directors, I sat, my chair every month was in between Dennis Archer and George Blaha.
Interesting.
Right? So I already had a relationship and understanding of Archer's thought
Politics,
process, right? Which I didn't jive with completely, but he taught me a lot. I appreciated something,
And let me say this, and I like even where you're framing this. So like even as you're going to get into the framing, like I have even on here, I don't agree with everything anybody. I don't agree with a lot of my opinions from 2 years ago. You know what I'm saying? But having a contextual understanding of it means we can respectfully see, okay, this is where leadership. This is what we agree with. This is what we agree on. This is where we disagree. Yeah. We can probably meet in the middle here and move forward with these agendas. And that's
and that's a sliding scale. Some people you agree with more than others. And and I think that's where you decide where you lean, right?
True.
So although I didn't lean Archer, I kind of knew what to expect coming back to Detroit. Right? I knew some of his ideas beforehand, before he became mayor, and what he would want to implement if he had the chance. So I wasn't in complete shock. My biggest shock coming home was when I went away to college, it was a complete culture shock.
Yeah.
But coming home was a new culture shock.
I was going to say, yeah.
Right? Because Detroit was different. No pun intended.
Yeah, I mean,
Detroit was different, right?
Especially those years, and I'm a kid, and for people to notice, it's like, okay, let me give you all a little bit of my understanding, and the Kari Frazier perspective of the Dennis Archer approach. At the time when he's elected to mayor. So remember, this is from the shadows of Coleman Young. Coleman Young is thrusted into
that was our royalty.
An executive position. On a complete stance of pure blackness, as we've had even in the Shelley McIntosh interview. Like, I didn't even know this, but the minute he's elected, the police department, primarily white at the time, point blank said, we ain't going out. And we're going on strike just because this black man is elected.
And so, white flight happened immediately.
Like it was happening, but it expeditiously happened at that point in time.
It snowballed.
And not just white flight, but as Theo Pride brings up, check the archives, like the resources from the state government and federal government are not coming. So now Detroit and a lot of other like black cities need to come up with resourceful ways, which is what starts like the DGC.
Corporations started announcing
all of these things that need to happen. So because the city needs to earn money, because the government is no longer being fair and equitable with the taxation and sharing with any black leadership. So the stances that Coleman Young takes in the early 70s that carry throughout his tenure are stances of like, yo, you can hit 8 Mile and definitely using a lot of colorful language about it, because the way that a lot of the government systems were interacting with Detroit was very adversarial because of black leadership.
No doubt.
So Dennis Archer's perspective and argument was, in my mind, this is the Kari perspective, was, okay, we can work with and reach across the aisle and work with the suburbs. We can work with a lot of people we've ousted. We can work with business leaders. One of the first things that he does, which I think today, and brought up in Check the Detroit is Different archives when I interview Anthony Adams, is he cuts the non-resident taxation for people that work and live in the city of Detroit. And he was also very open to saying there will no longer necessarily be residency laws to work for the city of Detroit and live in the city.
Yeah.
So two things happen in our tax base by basically saying the non-resident taxation, meaning Detroit, you have an income tax in the city of Detroit, and it pays up for a lot that happens in the city of Detroit, was at one point in time 3%.
Right.
3% of whatever you had came if you made it and you worked here as a non-resident. That was cut in half by half to 1.5, and a revenue sharing that's like, okay, the state will give this money back, which the state has never given this money back.
Never.
This is one of the key arguments from my late
Democratic
godmother.
or Republican governors.
Yes, and key argument in my late godmother that you work with, and definitely a godmother to you too, of JoAnn Watson, where she was saying that the state of Michigan has owed the city of Detroit since Archer's been in office because they've never honored that deal. That was one of them.
Her argument of how could we have a $350 million deficit if the state owes us $725 million?
Exactly. That
and how can that same state, that same entity, take us over?
Yes.
If what they owe us is greater than our deficit.
Yes. So I want to frame this the right way so people get it.
It's so critical.
Archer's perspective was, okay, if you allow the business people and work with the suburbs, then we're going to get more revenue sharing. And for that, a lot of deals were made, and Detroit provided our end of the deal, and a lot of our partners in business in the suburbs have not, in the state of Michigan, as you see, did not provide their end of the deal. And it was one of those give and take scenarios of things.
And that's because the deal was written so horribly.
And all I'm saying is I'm just giving the argument for where Archer's coming from. And it was a lot of support of it because this is a metro, and people are like, why is that guy so angry? Meaning Coleman Young. Coleman Young was angry because the what was happening to Detroit, whereas Archer comes in a different perspective, saying we can make some deals.
Yeah,
and now this is the Detroit you come back.
Coleman Young got the blame for the furlough days. Yeah, and the and that period in time, and I remember this where we could have trash pickup for months. You know what I mean? Because the state government was trying to drain the city, right? So, but that's a whole nother.
I wanted to frame.
Yeah, that's a whole segment we can get into, brother.
I wanted to just frame it so people know that the Archer's perspective was more like really like a Barack Obama's perspective of let's reach across the aisle, let's work together, and let's get to solutions because it'll, what is it? The rising tide raises all ships. Yeah, that was the perspective.
Yeah, I think, and there's a lot of political ideology behind that, so I won't get into that. But I think that. I think had he been open to more advisors from different segments, and if that language would have been looked at under a better telescope or microscope, rather, that wouldn't be an issue now.
And it's still as that's the Kari Frazier key thing that I've been saying to the reparations task force. That pool of money right there, that non-resident tax, that should be our pocket of money for reparations for people that have been harmed municipally from the city of Detroit for different things and acts over time.
Absolutely.
We can even start with the people that were overassessed in taxes. That should come from that non-resident tax because it was not honored coming back, especially being that a lot more people actually work in the city of Detroit but don't live here.
Yeah, that's like when the state said we're going to give everybody $400 for the driver's responsibility snafu, but they gave it to everybody in the state, and most people in the state didn't get hurt by it. Yeah, it was very much targeted towards Flint and Detroit. You know what I mean? In certain areas,
black folks.
yeah. So so it was like you're giving reparations, really. Yeah, but you're giving reparations to people that weren't impacted
really harmed
by it. In fact, they benefited from it.
So like now I can culturally get into this discussion because you come back to a Detroit, you kind of already knew that this is where it would be, but still seeing something is still different than kind of knowing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It made me become a poet.
And I figured that's where you were going to go because now that also is the start of what we say, the spoken word scene, the Cafe Mahogany. And
I had a lot to say. I had a lot of angst and anger and disgust, but I had a lot of hope and love and desire for the city. So it's not exactly what made me become a poet, but it quickly became the lens in which
You could get it out.
I would use to create a lot of my work. And if you recall, shortly after me coming home was the George W. Bush era began.
Yeah.
Right, just a couple, like, a few years, 3-4 years later. So I also had the lens of the war, the issues in Detroit, the national issues of anti-blackness. I met my brother Righteous Knowledge Out Loud on the basketball court. We played ball a lot together, and then we ran into each other in the poetry venue.
Interesting.
And then we both had kind of the same lens on, and Rihanna, his wife, on what we wanted to talk about. Met Corey and Tiffany and hired Khaled as our manager, so we were like straight up black. But yeah, so coming home gave me a sense of urgency, not just from a activism standpoint, but from an artistic standpoint. Excuse me, brother. And figuring out where those worlds came together was the biggest challenge for me. And one of the greatest things that could happen to me was I worked on JoAnn Watson's campaign, her first campaign.
And wait, I want you to share that. And so
Okay,
people
we're gonna
don't,
get into that.
I want you to get at because, all right, so a couple different things about my godmother's first campaign, right? It was a special election.
Yep.
That was one thing.
Brenda Scott's seat had become vacant due to her passing. And then ran against Gil Hill.
And you're running against Gil Hill. And Gil Hill, like, and some people still think he won the mayoral election the first time against Mayor Kilpatrick. But it was not that much of a mark. Like,
No, it was slim.
And he was the city council president.
Yeah.
And he was also Officer Todd in Beverly Hills. You know what I'm saying? So, like, Gil Hill was, like, all signs pointed to, like, I was shocked that Mayor Kilpatrick won. You know what I'm saying? For most people.
Yeah.
He was a very beloved candidate and a long-standing city council member, long-standing with the police.
Yeah. Chief of police for a while. Yeah.
So the thought process of my godmother, Wake Up Detroit, JoAnn Watson, grassroots.
Yeah.
I mean, wearing more dashikis and gaylays than you could imagine. Staunchly talking about white supremacy and reparations and uplifting.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Omari Barksdale, if anybody wants to study the Republic of New Africa, is with her most of the time.
Yeah.
So, like, when you talk about being black, boy, it don't get more black than the Republic of New Africa. You know what I'm saying?
No, not at all.
Africa with a K, not a C. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Free to land is how most of the greetings start. You know what I'm saying? So talk about working on that campaign, because I was kind of looking at my mom and them, and I was thinking to myself, like, this seems crazy.
So it was the first political campaign I worked heavily on. It was my introduction into the political world. I didn't know for maybe 2 or 3 years that the way we raised money on such a grassroots level was abnormal. I didn't know it was abnormal, right? Because most of JoAnn Watson's financing came from the people.
Yeah.
$5, $10, $15. Somebody might walk in with a check. Dr. Claude Anderson might send a check for a certain amount, and but no corporations, no companies, unless they were black owned.
Yep.
And still connected grassroots, like no multi-million-dollar black company.
No offense to Barton Cable, but Barton Cable was not dropping.
Right.
Don Barton was not dropping no, no heavy coins. You was looking at it was a lot of checks with no commas. A lot of checks with no commas. You know what I'm saying?
And so I was like, the people, and see, my mother graduated high school with
Mama Watson.
Councilmember Watson, right?
I was figuring that.
Right. So I knew her from a different lens, but I never really knew her personally. I just knew of her.
As your mom's friend, kind of.
Yeah. So seeing her, hearing her talk, and let me say this. Nobody in the entire existence of the world I live in that I know had the memory and the historical knowledge of Detroit like JoAnn Watson did. Right?
Understatement.
And if you try to argue with JoAnn Watson by telling her she didn't say that or I didn't say that, don't fight that battle.
No.
Because she remembers pretty much verbatim what was said.
Yeah.
Right? You know, it was watching her be this savant, be this brilliant. I hate to use the word mastermind because it's used kind of negatively sometimes, but to watch her work in a way that was for the people, in a way that was very much ingrained in history and fact. I don't know many people that operate in fact as well as she did, and context.
Yeah.
At these WYMCA meetings on Jefferson, every week when we had the rallies and the hype up session and all of that, just watching all the people come in and, sing and talk, and caterers donate African-centered dishes for our meals, and, seeing the kids in the room and the adults and the elders. Some of the elders passed in the process. You know what I mean? Just seeing that community. I had never been in the Pan-African community like that before.
Wow.
So it was,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I was mind blown.
Yeah.
I was tapped into my blackness already. But I didn't realize how much I wasn't tapped into the part of the black community that I could get so much food from, mentally, spiritually.
And let me say this too, in our honor. My godmother was asked to run from a couple key figures that she looked up to. Her godmother,
Yep.
Irma L. Henderson,
Yep.
Esquire.
She used to have me take meals too.
Oh yeah.
But she always said you shouldn't run for office until you're called to.
And also Marianne Mahaffey.
Marianne Mahaffey. I loved Marianne Mahaffey.
John Conyers at the time also was like, yo.
She was working for John Conyers at the time. Yeah.
So part of her run was so, like, multiple people were asking, and people in spaces. And those are three that I know it's like, all right, let me take a little bit of heed.
Yeah.
So with that, you see this victory, and that many people, I mean, to this day, I think that may be one of the most shocking political victories
Yeah.
in Detroit history. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What was it like the night that it won, and then now shifting into office?
Man, the night that we won, I want to say, I don't know if it was the first time or the second time we won that we were down at WHPR on Woodward and Highland Park.
Mm-hmm.
We had a big, I want to say it was there. But I just remember the energy being so
high.
If you could imagine, if and this is not to you, but to the audience, anybody that listens, if you could imagine the highest feeling you could feel and the heaviest weight falling off at the same time, you're in the stratosphere. Because you were part of this thing that was so major, and not in the typical way of being part of a campaign that wins, and not in the typical way of putting in all this effort, but in the typical way of, there was a different historical element to this particular moment in time. You know what I mean? Like, you knew that there was a certain representation going into office that had never been seen before. And that's not to knock the great representation
Yeah.
of the Clyde Clevens and the Irma Hendersons. And, this was just different.
It was a collective win
Yeah.
for the people.
Yeah.
And that grassroots, like you say, the people really giving $5, $10,
Yeah.
they're writing the $15 check.
Like, we won.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, and to see a woman in African garb not being afraid to go into, these spaces that nobody else is wearing African garb from a genuine standpoint. But it was funny because I had no aspirations of working for Councilmember Watson. She called me one day. She knew my background as a bodyguard, bouncer. She asked me to be her driver and bodyguard. So that's what she hired me for.
Yeah.
When I got to the office, there were a couple of things that happened with people she hired, including, an illness, that took, that eventually took, who was one of her campaign managers, Cynthia Simpson, Barbara Rose Collins' daughter,
Yeah.
succumbed to cancer.
Wow.
I think she was originally supposed to be either the chief of staff or legislative assistant. David Rambo wound up being I can't remember who was supposed to be the chief of staff, but one of those two. But David Rambo was our chief of staff initially. But a couple of the legislative assistant positions didn't, as a result of some stuff, didn't get filled. So she was like, okay, I need you to
Feel this there.
write these 11 resolutions, these 11 task force resolutions. And I was like, what the hell is a resolution?
Hilarious. Hilarious.
So, I went around and I did know some people on the floor, and I asked about the resolutions, and she had told me to research it online, so I did that. And then I got a couple samples of resolutions. So I created these 11 task force resolutions that all got passed. And I was like, wow. So she saw me in a way I didn't see me. And that took my confidence through the roof.
And I also want you to one of the resolutions that she wrote kind of goes into the reparations piece I did. A debt owed, not a handout.
Reparations task. The original reparations task force.
I want to talk. Okay, I do want to. I remember when I talked to Marcia, another one of the people that worked in the cabinet with Mama Watson. So even before I say that, let me say this about Mama Watson. I run into so many people that say, I want to be in city council. I want to be in city council. I want to be in city council. And then I think to myself, like, you don't really have a legislative disposition, okay? Because being a legislator, for people to understand this, is you need to definitely be, it's going to be pure politics of quid pro quo, meaning that you're going to have allies that want, they have their work that they want to pass through. You have your work that you need to pass through. You need to keep the integrity of the people that you support. They're going to keep the integrity for whatever their interests are. I'm just speaking more so from this lens. And you need to have, you need to understand it's not an executive position. And you're winning over a lot of hearts and minds. You're bringing together unity, and you also have to have, like what you said, be ready. The amount of ordinances and precedents that Mama Watson set forth in her tenure, the closest thing to it was the work of Irma Henderson in her tenure. Like when you look at the book of city law, so like a city law is an ordinance of the city of Detroit. Most of these ordinances you're going to go through, you're going to see so much Henderson. And Watson.
Oh, yeah.
Henderson, Watson,
Yeah.
Henderson, Watson, abstaining voting.
Yeah.
With a comment. Things like this are like masterful, because I like the mastermind, just masterful ways of knowing how systems and things work and and how data can be used, keeping a legal mind, like Attorney Brown and different people, and connecting the right cabinet and still being with the people as well in community, but also understanding the mechanisms of it, because city council can be so powerful if you know what it is.
Yeah.
But if you don't know what it is, it can almost be the most nothing can happen position.
Yeah. It could be like trying to play football on a basketball court.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I just want to say that one critical thing that came out of Councilmember Watson's tenure, because she challenged me. She put me through the ringer. Like and I know you experienced,
Oh, I mean, all the time.
She didn't play.
She was not.
Right?
She was not. Yes.
But first off, she gave me the framework of my complete political view moving forward. She taught me everything I knew that I know now about politics for the most part. But she also, one of the most critical things I think that happened was when she started challenging contracts and demanding information on the people who were asking for the contracts, demanding information on change fees, and actually demanding that we examine contracts to make sure that things are on the up and up, and then challenge them to say, why do we always, almost 100% of the time, give contracts to only white contractors? Like, we have all these black contractors applying, but none of them are getting honored, the contracts. So she really got the ball rolling on challenging those things.
And this is also where my godmother stands in blackness, but you're going to get a lot of enemies and where it starts, which leads right to an ordinance that she created, which connects to some of the work that Dorothy Tillman was doing in Chicago.
Yep.
Was an ordinance where if you were...
Slave Era Withholding Act.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want you to share a little bit about it, but because I talk about it, but I'm going to take this clip and actually put it in, because I need to add this in, because for people that don't understand, it's an ordinance that still sits that if your business made money and profited from the enslaving of our people, then you need to disclose this information, which was going to help the legal strategies of a lot of those attorneys that were gathering, but not successful in getting the information from these corporations that profited from enslavement due to like name changes and stuff like that, because companies shift and change and all of that. But it's like, oh, you still want this $1 billion contract with a predominantly black city, but you profited from slavery in the past of your business. Guess what? We need to know that. We're gonna get this information over to them, because you're gonna have something swiftly coming to you about our reparations. Talk a little bit about that, because even when I searched the archives of the Detroit News and Free Press, it was hard to find what it was. It was covered a little bit, but it was more adversarially saying that this is stupid, I don't know why it exists, and all of these other things. What was that like? What was the tone of that ordinance?
So there were some black faces on council that were against it. But in working with Dorothy Tillman, the Honorable Dorothy Tillman's office in Chicago, I quickly learned how not only did these companies do business during slavery and incorporating slavery, or should I say being either incorporated in slavery or adjacent or ancillary to slavery. But some of them still had profits left over in 2004 from slavery, right? So some of these businesses, not only were they involved in the world of slavery, they were the bounty hunting companies, they were the slave insuring companies. They were specifically, a lot of them linked to the policing and the securing of black bodies back then, right? So Aflac, Aetna, Bank One, which is now Chase, and so many different companies fall into that category. And I'm not saying that to slander those companies. I'm saying that because that's the fact, right? So the issue with it is You know how we say, how we hear oftentimes, well, why am I being punished for what my ancestors did? And we say, well, there are many things you still have that are benefits from that. These companies still have benefits left over. In fact, their complete existence is a total benefit from slavery, right? So you have wealthy families continuing to get wealthy from the origins of slavery that never give back to the community. And if they do give back, it's only from a marketing and PR standpoint. So when we talk about reparations, we're talking about not just repairing families and legacies and generations that were destroyed and separated. We're talking about the head start that these groups have, right? These individuals or these companies have created for people who look like them, which creates a continued deficit for people who look like us. So while you started the race 2 laps ago, and we only get to start the race now.
And pushing this through, as you said, it was even black folks on council. I don't remember who those were, but I got an idea of a couple of them. I'm pretty sure one of them.
I won't say names because I don't want to.
One is a pastor. But, so go back in time and look at who was a pastor at the time. Not the one you're thinking, but the other one. But what was as that was moving forward? What was the feel in the city of Detroit? What were people saying as you were engaging? Just
well, it was a little ugly, because it wasn't that much distance in time between that and Africantown, right? So the Africantown legislation that eventually passed and then eventually got created legislation to supersede it, which crushed it. There was a lot of anti-black rhetoric, right? And this was coming from, and my views and opinions don't reflect that of Kari Frazier and the Detroit is Different podcast, right? So there was a lot of anti-black rhetoric and protesting coming from Hispanic organizations. And I only say Hispanic organizations because that's what they labeled themselves as, right? I don't typically use the word Hispanic, but that's literally what they considered themselves. The Regional Chamber of Commerce was behind, and then our own black people, which, unfortunately, a lot of us don't understand economics, group economics, and the impact of that. So it was a lot of people saying, we already an all-black city, why we need an African town? Or why do we need a slave era disclosure act when slavery isn't around anymore, right? So because our context wasn't being promoted in media, most people didn't understand the context. So it was a lot of anti-sentiment, negative sentiment coming back towards us. I mean, I would come home sometimes and there would be news crews on my front lawn. And they don't want to ask me contextual questions. They want to throw out accusations, and I just bypass them. You know what I mean? And I'm sure it happened to other staff members. But yeah, so it was contentious, and the council was pretty split 5-4 on most things that had to do anything with anything black, right? So, we had a white council member, not Marion Mahaffey, that was very much against anything black, right? Everything that was black that came to the table, she was against it. And she led the charge of a lot of the anti-black stuff that happened and that was said at the council table during that time. And there were some black council members that followed her lock and step. So, it was tough. And keep in mind during this time, we also had a full review and investigation from the FBI because of some issues with Kwame Kilpatrick and a statement made by Lonnie Bates. They came in and fine-tooth-combed every office. So it was so much going on, man. I mean, it made our hours a lot longer. It made the stress levels higher. But I don't think any of us regretted doing the work we were doing because it was for the people.
I love that you shared that. and you worked with Dorothy Tillman,
Yeah.
connecting in it, and that's where I was looking for some information about this moving forward with this ordinance. What was that relationship like? Because another thing about Mama Watson is she's supportive of black folks, black women. She's beyond a champion for,
Yeah.
and just got a network with black women across the world.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Rest in peace.
Yeah, they absolutely maintained a positive relationship, and were able to bounce ideas off each other. You know what I mean? Like when you're in that position, you need someone. You know, of course, she had Irma Henderson. Of course, she had Rosa Parks. You know, as she was developing her ideologies, because Rosa Parks was here. You know, she had Coleman Young, who she was close to. So she had some strong leadership, but she needed contemporaries too. So, you know, Dorothy Tillman, Cynthia McKinney, you know, she had very strong connections with them, and she would have conversations with them about ideas and perspectives. So yeah, her and Dorothy Tillman had a really healthy working relationship, and we worked on a couple of different things together.
So from this politically, because in this time also, this connects you with someone else that's walking through those chambers, as I know of, in Londale Thomas, and some of the other people, and then so the people kind of understand how city council works. The city council member changes, but in reality, just from how I've seen it, if you end up in a city council staff and you don't, don't really raise no waves, meaning like run for office or do some crazy scandal or something like
work
that,
there forever.
you can work in city council staff forever. You know what I'm saying? And that's one of the big, it's like a 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. So I know they some of them definitely watch Detroit is different. So I'm not, hit dog holler. You know, I'm not necessarily talking about you specifically, but I also think that this frames some of the ways where when people talk about changes needing to happen, if we're framing things written the same way, if we're looking at ordinances the same way, though you still need to understand, like you say, you got to know how to work the machine.
Yeah.
But man, when you think about the amount of people that just stay, because I mean, if you go down to the 13th floor now, you probably going.
Yeah, I see him quite a few. I go down there because of my work.
Yeah.
With Londale, I still
connect a little.
I still have to be down there sometimes. So
in that, you dip from that because you could have been in there. I'm thinking in my mind like,
yeah.
What was the? All right, I need to shift off. I'm gonna do something else.
Well, one thing is I wanted to run for office because I wanted to extend Honorable JoAnn Watson's ideologies into the state. So I ran for state representative.
What year?
2006 was that election.
Ah, man.
Yeah. So I ran against 16, I think it was 16 of us. Which was District 4 at the time. And the person that won was actually my intern at Councilmember Watson's office, which was Coleman Young Jr.
Okay.
So my exodus from city council was a little controversial, which I'd rather not get into it because, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
Because, and I don't want to disparage any of the parties involved, but it wasn't, it was really suspicious, right? So, but I had already given my my notice to leave.
Yeah.
Before that stuff happened. But I was accused by another council member of doing something that I absolutely did not do. Right. So and there were motivations behind it that were easy to see, but I didn't want to.
You didn't want to.
I didn't want to politicize Councilmember Watson's office.
I got you.
You know. So, but it's politics.
It's so even in learning it.
Yeah.
and then taking that on, and then you're still in the same space of in the creative space too. So the artistry and activism and seeing how it expands, and during this time, like you say, 2006, this is when I think the poetry movement is like, you know what I'm saying, like.
Yeah.
Other performers like 2006 to like 2011, it's like comedians, singers, everybody's trying to go to a poetry night to get on a stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
happening in reference to that as this is running concurrent? How are you balancing both?
So I started heavy. So we started Third Eye Open in 2002, right? And we made a major impact
You got that right.
around the country, and it was amazing. The travel, the universities, the stuff here. We were called on to do everything. Our first show together was on September 11th, 2002,
Wow.
right? Malik Shabazz talked to Khalid about bringing us in to open up for Professor Griff for a lecture. That's where we met Griff. That's where all of
Ain't
us
that
met
something?
Griff.
Where
right?
was the lecture?
It was at the Aquaba Center.
It don't get more blacker than the whole.
And it was hot as heck in that room, and Griff spoke for like 6 hours.
It's always hot the Aquaba Center. It's like Aquaba Center seems like the revolution is coming. It's like, damn, revolution happening.
So that's where we met Griff, and that's where our relationship started with Griff.
Okay.
Right. So we were popping off there. We got, Kari Kamani Turner had Black Bottom Collective that was popping.
Yeah.
Mike Ellison was
Doing his
popping
thing
with the poetry.
Yeah.
We were already coming off of the run that Joe Fluent Green had with Cafe Mahogany.
Yep.
So there was a momentum. Sparrow had the Key Club, which was really where I broke myself in. And moving forward, I met Legacy at the very beginning and Ben Jones. So we all had a big family, and it was an explosion into the poetry community, and it just bolstered everything. Def Poetry Jam was major at that time.
Yeah.
So that really drew people's attention to their local poetry scene. So later on, I met people like, I saw Londale working for Alberta Tinsley Talabi in the office, in the hallways, and then I ran into him at a poetry spot one night. And so we wound up doing competitions together, won a championship together in the Midwest region, and I got in the slam. I mean, it was just, man, listen, that's a 20-hour segment within itself.
I like that you're giving this, but it's also running concurrent with the activism and seeing that politically.
Yeah, we were doing anti-war rallies. We were doing poems about George Bush and the war and Dick Cheney. And
I don't know if you remember this, but another spot I loved, and I need to get him in here and talk about 10-year stuff. But remember the Johansson Art Gallery?
Johansson Gallery, yeah.
And when Kevin Hansen that ran that did an anti-war rally, it's like I remember you were there. Londale was there. This was early in Nadir before we had the 1440 together.
Yeah.
Jenny Lee was there before Allied Media and all of that stuff. It's like young anti-Bush.
I think the long hairs was there. And it was quite a few people, man.
Yeah, like people that I look at now and it's like, damn, I remember them back then. You know what I'm saying? So this is all running concurrent.
Yeah.
And as this is happening concurrently, like at that time, it seems like a lot of you all are shifting the way that you function in how you're going to engage systems, because you still do so much work there.
Yeah.
What have you found now as we're getting closer to a close, and I got to bring you back, that functions more politically? What would you say from then to now about like these systems as now you've transversed into different forms of still writing, but seeing legislatively how systems can change?
I think that from a legislative standpoint, not much changes because the people aren't forcing it to change. And I think that there's a lot of legislation going around that are being pushed by small organizations and groups, but they don't necessarily represent the whole or even a mass amount of people. So I think that we need to become, and you know the old saying, we need to get more politically involved. I think we need to become more politically astute, right? Like we talk about just get out and vote. Just vote. No, don't just vote. Like learn why and how you're voting, right? Like have a plan, have a developed plan to vote. Because if you just vote with no information and no knowledge, your vote is a shot in the dark. You know what I mean? It's a dart thrown into a crowd, and you might hit the right place. You might not.
I love you said that because Lord knows I've been having so many debates with some OGs about this upcoming election.
Yeah.
And that argument of just, the voter die or whatever. And like I say, one of the first things I often tell people is like, okay, and Mama Watson usually gets brought up, but I'm like, who's the most effective politician you've ever seen? Why were they effective? What's the legitimate expectation for what I can expect? Is it because, and then this is the other question that I kind of got for you that's been wrapping in my mind, especially in a city like Detroit. People are in political office and a lot of residents with such high apathy. 18% voter turnout of the people that are registered to vote.
Yeah.
So that means 82% of the people is like, I ain't got time for this. Or I don't feel like it will, whatever. They're not doing it. So I'm taking that as they feel that it's a waste.
Yeah.
With that being said, it's kind of like a pervasive belief, and I sometimes even hear it, that people are celebratory over a politician doing something for them. And I can even sometimes be slighted and feel this way, as opposed to understanding that, no, this person is in this position to do something for us.
Right.
How do we shift that perspective? Because I'm sure you run into this as well.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding your question.
The question is this. It's a lot of belief that when politicians do something for the people are applauding it, which it should be done, but the responsibility and accountability for holding office does not seem to be for residents and people.
So for one, we should applaud when they do the right thing, but we should take that applause and use it as leverage to get them to continue doing the right things, right? And to continue. But one thing I don't see from politicians, and I hope I'm addressing this correctly, is that they aren't, sometimes they're not coming to the table with genuine and healthy motivations. And when they do, a lot of times they don't know how to duplicate themselves. John Conyers duplicated himself. He produced other people to go out into the political world and have an impact, right? A positive impact. He produced a JoAnn Watson, and that's not to say he gets all the credit for her and who she is. But what I'm saying is she learned a lot under him. So so we're not mentoring enough from genuine and ethical and healthy standpoints in the political world. And a lot of times when we do mentor people in our offices or in the community, we're doing it from a conservative lens, right? A black conservative lens, which is not the same as a white conservative lens. A black conservative lens is, you have to wear a suit that looks like this every day. You have to do these rigid things every day. And none of that has to do with working for the people, right? So we're not getting into the conversations about the people's needs. We're getting into conversations about what the last news article or the buzz is around the country about what people want.
I like that you framed it because you picked my question up and ran even further than I expected because that's really where it's at. It's almost like I feel that some of the arguments are trying to tell us as the people why we should want what you're offering. Meaning, you know, like you're a kid, like, hey, Ma, I want pizza for dinner. Nah, you gonna want green beans.
Right.
It's like that.
Which is why you see so many of them running on the same platform. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, when I ran for office, my message wasn't heard because it wasn't popular. Right? And I'm not knocking the people for that.
Yeah.
I didn't do a good enough job. But I had welfare reform. I mean, not welfare reform. I had abortion and foster care reform in mind, right? Which talked about ways to protect children from being used as basically slaves or experiencing sexual abuse and being tossed around from one house to the next, right? Like, to me, that was a critical piece. So I didn't have your typical points. I maybe had a couple of them, but I still even had a degree of difference on how I approached those.
Yeah.
Right? So, but everybody has education,
Safety.
jobs,
And safety. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, everybody has that.
Yeah.
I should be able to assume that you as somebody who wants to serve me in office, that those are the basic things you want to do. Mm-hmm. But tell me why and what you're going to do to work on the things that aren't buzz topics that negatively impact our community every day.
Yeah.
And JoAnn Watson did that.
She did it abundantly.
Yeah.
And as you share in that, because as you say, astuteness, that's also one of the toughest things that happens, is that people are evaluating these positions. Are you going to get a new batch of Detroit is Different political education videos about the role of what a city council member does, what a commission is, what a task force is, because that's another one of my big gripes with the task force. This needs to be a commission. You need executive action connected to it. A task force is a body under the city council, and the reparations task force, as I always say, is the one sitting task force without a sitting city council member. So I'm not saying it's like it ends up being more suggestive than actionable. It's the actionable renters commission that now exists in the city of Detroit is powerful. Mm-hmm. It's going to change and need some shifts, but you know, the people have been saying for years, yo, being a renter in the city of Detroit is messed up. And now that we have so many renters in the city of Detroit, a renters commission, that's actionable.
See, that's because it now has teeth and it has monitoring. Mm-hmm. There are so many laws on the books that don't have a monitoring system with them, right? Clyde Cleveland created a law, a city law, and then JoAnn Watson and Marianne Mahaffey and a couple others brought it back and updated it related to these parking lots, right? That says something like you have to post your price. It has to stay that way for 30 days. If you're going to change it, no, it has to stay that way for 40 days. If you're going to change it, you have to post it, and it has to stay that same amount for 40 days, right? This keeps them from
price gouging on like
and changing every day and per event.
When the games across the street is $60,
so
but then on Tuesday night when nothing's happening, it's $10.
So that law's been on the books for 30 years.
Wow.
And it probably, I'm sure it's still there, but there's never been an enforcement agency behind it. There's never been a real time, a real employee designated to go out and monitor those and penalize them, because there's heavy penalties.
We know that that's what's happening because depending upon, like, especially in the summer, you know, if it's a concert and a baseball game and
the draft, there were parking lots for $120.
Yeah, you know that's not their price. Yeah, exactly. And if you can get away with it, you're going to get away with it. But this is also some of the contentious relationship where, you know, not just the city of Detroit, but America itself honors a business more than it honors a person.
And then there are certain entities that own 70 between
Percent
two
of-
entities own 70% of the lots.
like the towing
Yeah.
industry that has been in limbo and back and forth in Detroit
Yeah.
for years of what happens. And I want to throw this at you because even my short stint there, I wasn't there down there that long. It was just too much of a headache for me. But I often share this with people. During the time, it was with the Centergrow deal for the incinerator.
Yeah.
And even some people I knew like were connected to the opposition side of this argument. And I'm gonna just give this to most people. Like you can go in there with your staunch, I believe this, and I'm for the people, but the argument presented to council, because you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, possibly billions of dollars, because city council controls the purse strings of how money is given.
Yeah.
That's where the contractual, you're getting into some real heavy waters if you're going to challenge that, like Mama Watson did. But I remember some of these arguments for the incinerator deal. Like I remember when they first came in, with, and I'm just using the agency just so people can get it. They came in with the black pastor. Then the black pastor came in with like the Asian scientist. Then the Asian scientist came in with the black scientist.
The script.
Then they came in with like the finest black woman attorney. Then they came in with the finest white woman secretary. Then they came in with the finest Mexican secretary. Then they came in with the very attractive guy. It's like they arm you and bombard you. Then they came in with their community person. Like
They followed the script.
And the argument, and they will fill the council like almost audience and stuff where you sitting in there and everybody there is like, this makes sense. It's like, I done seen that person before in community. I done seen that person. She's fine as ever. This guy looks smart as all get up. I don't even know somebody that's a geoscientist. Then you sitting in there saying, you know what? An incinerator may be the best option for this community to actually breathe good air. Like, it's such a whirlwind. The same way like police officers can talk you and convince people through duress for holding you for 45
Starving
days
you,
making you say, you know what? Yeah, I killed all them people. And then them people are alive. Like it's the whirlwind and it ain't even duress. It's just
it's a beatdown.
Yes, the lobbying
Bombardment.
connected to this. And then you got the community person that's really being harmed. That's probably coming in there with a notebook. Definitely does not have the oratory skills, even to somebody like, I got a marketing.
Might not even get the 2 minutes in public speaking.
Probably getting a minute at a time.
Yeah.
Angry as all, paying a whole lot of money to park.
One of the council members is going to try to out-articulate him.
And this is the community.
Yeah.
Versus this whole machine over here. And they even have their group of people that's in community, but they in clean shirts and.
Yeah. but I do want to say that in talking to some of the council members that are active right now, I do like where their head is. Right, like they need help though. They need help from the community. They need help to develop their vision. They need help to push the vision forward. They need the community to step up and help them hold people accountable. And I can't say that for all of them, but there are some, right? So we do have some people we could work with right now if we put the pressure in the right way. I'm
just ambitious and optimistic on this. I think if the community has that heightened, like that word astute, I'm going to take that. If we're more aware, as I always say, and people get mad at me when I say this, it's like if we're aware, because we've seen this over time, and at the right tipping point, where we're cognitive of what's happening, you can have a Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan and they're going to sit down and going to have to engage with us.
Yeah.
I know that's very extreme, but that's the level of community engagement, because if we're not that engaged, even the people that are our champions will falter because they're not going to see what's representative of what will happen. And we've all saw that. Like the George Floyd moments reverberated through all sectors because people would sit at home thinking, oh man, it's about to blow up and we gonna lose everything. And
that's why they didn't want African Town to happen.
Yeah.
And that's why so many, that's why we need Detroit Food Co-op.
Yes.
That's why we need black business epicenters.
Yes.
Because without that economic collaborative power, we have no political power.
Yeah.
Right? Because even if we gather and push, we have to be able to do it in a way that affects the dollars or controls the dollars, right? So that's why we need a Detroit People's Food Co-op, and we need to build a walkable area of black-owned businesses in that area that also feed into the black community, like because we need that economic power.
And more than that, I mean, this is going back to the recall of kind of where we started with the Alabama bus boycott.
Yeah,
Like, because if you can topple what's happening, because right now it clearly looks like, in my mind, this is just a Kari opinion, as you say, not even Detroit is different opinion. I think in a lot of ways we're in what one would consider World War III, and our adversarial enemies of this, because I think America's made it that, or what it is China and Russia. But they're not fighting this war on grounds of military. They're fighting this economically.
yeah,
And it's having a lot of stuff changing
yeah,
on how things is happening globally, especially economically, if you're following some of the trends, what's happening globally. And a lot of the Western nations that have been at the helm of a lot of these decisions right now
yeah.
are not in the same position, and it's changing everything.
Absolutely. You know, I do hope you bring me back because
I would love to.
I want to talk about something that I've been working on called FIST, Fair Insurance Service Trackers. Right?
What's that?
It's and I don't want to say too much publicly right now, but it's basically a collaborative, a group collaborative vision to drive down prices from different industries into our, that operate in our community. But I also want to talk about, I really want to get into the Black History 101 Mobile Museum. I want to get into Sasha Center.
I wanted to talk a little. I definitely want you to speak on both, because Kalima would be like, "Oh yeah, I love Kalima." Another MC.
Yeah,
I still see.
Yeah, and
MC and poet, but MC Nikki D. But speak on that.
And I have a documentary coming out too about Detroit poetry.
Okay,
which we should wrap next week. Next month. So, but the work I do with Sasha Center. First off, Kalima is an incredible poet, and we met in the poetry world. She was the first slam coordinator I ever worked with. I've done a lot of slams around the country. The work at Sasha Center we do is about African American women who are sexual assault experiences and survivors. But we also do other work outside of Sasha Center that is about gender-based violence in general. I educate on healthy masculinity, gender-based violence, nonviolent bystander intervention techniques, so on and so forth. So that's some of the work I get to do. I'm the director of programming for male engagement at Sasha Center. So I work with men's groups. I do programming for men, not just for men, but primarily for men. So we can start having these conversations, vulnerable conversations, as well as very critical conversations about gender-based violence and ego and masculinity, and how to operate and model ourselves in a healthier form for the next generations.
Man, that's like that's 360 back to black.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But Sasha Center is an organization that unapologetically services African American women who are survivors and experiencers of sexual assault. One of the lead organizations in the country in doing so. I don't think there was another organization in the country doing that until Sasha Center. We're 14 years old now. I'm one of the original founding board members. So we go to conferences, we go to trainings, we do work in the community. There are a lot of healing circles for black women to come and heal together. They might do things like cathartic things like gardening or writing poetry or hula hooping, or they might sit around and talk and examine, different things in their conversations. But we have some amazing women working at Sasha Center doing this work as facilitators and administrators. I'm not the only brother doing it. We have a brother named Hank. We have Spencer Murray, who's from Detroit, but he lives in Atlanta. So we do things virtually together.
Okay.
We've done a couple things in person together. So, we're constantly working to shift the anti-woman, anti-girl narratives and rhetoric that we hear so often, and trying to put men in a better place to when we come together with women. Hopefully those women will also be in a better place so we could communicate better and become more galvanized in our community. And end violence and sexual assault against black women and black girls. You know, make fair and safe spaces everywhere for black women and black girls. That's our goal. And we know we can't do that just at Sasha Center, but as we develop a web and a network of organizations and people around the country, our belief is we can do it together. Our motto at Sasha Center is healing is possible, because we do believe that. And that's how we operate.
And I need this. It's been long overdue for me to get, as I say, the 10-year Kalima come on. And I do want to applaud that work that I've witnessed. And the other key dynamic of the Sasha Center work, after the horrific tragedy of the murder of Native
Child, yeah.
Native child,
Yeah, Kelly May.
And the way that Kalima stepped up and was like, all right, we're going to do something. And I'm like, okay, I want to be there present for something, and let's make this constructive in honor. I thought that was phenomenal, and I'm glad I was present to at least give and be in that space. I also liked.
Which event was that? That was the.
It was the memorial that was after at off East Grand Boulevard.
Okay. Yeah, at the
I forget the name of that place.
At the Vanguard.
Yeah, at Vanguard. Yeah. And I do want to say this, because this is one of those tougher things, because as people know, it's like Kari's always so team dude and everything. America's the culture here is violent. Yeah. So like that's the first thing. And our understanding as black people living in more of a violent and destructive society and culture that it has been imposed upon us. Sometimes the only response we have is feeling that we can respond in that way. We need to be constructive and full of love and creativity. So you doing that work and figuring out other tools, because oftentimes for so many brothers that do feel, I believe that pain comes from feeling less than, not feeling worthy, not feeling as though you can be this aspired role of what you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And at that point, when you are so vulnerable, you do turn to some of the most grotesque and destructive ways.
Yeah.
It has fractured so much in our community. So figuring out more tools to approach that is powerful and is so necessary in the guise of this American experiment.
And I know we don't have much time, but I just want to say this, make sure I'm able to say this, and that is, I really want the men who are in range of my voice right now, as this is being played, to remember or think about one thing, and that is our ego, what I call our pseudo ego, which is the one that we usually tap into a lot, the most, right? Our pseudo ego is prosthetic. It is a symbiote. It's an entity that misguides us and uses our insecurities and our pain as the propelling force that feeds that direction. So, a lot of times when we're operating out of that pseudo ego, and it misdirects us to handle things in a way that is very unhealthy, very harmful, and very much like a wounded animal, So we want to start paying more attention to that within ourselves. We want to be introspective and start working on that within ourselves. I think once we start thinking about that, we can start to be honest that it does exist, and we can start to, want to work against it.
Yeah. That, very, very much so. And there is, like, even in this, like you say, like, there are groups that in the work you're doing where it's going to be brothers that ain't going to, clown you at the barbershop for it. And it'll be more powerful and respectful to get to a more place of where we can have a quality of life that seems so dissonant in communities like ours because of what we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
And the mobile Black History Museum, and I'm definitely gonna have Khaled on talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk about your work with that as you've connected to Khaled for forever, and the professor Ferris had this professor that started collecting so many archives.
Yeah, Dr. Pilgrim. That's where Khaled was. That's where he got it from. He inspired him to start collect his first piece.
So for people to really understand more of that relationship of systemic racism, and people be like, "Oh man, you so militant and mad." I'm just saying, as you say, it's facts. Like, Walt Disney started Disney off of a hit film that was about degrading the hell out of Black people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The Ku Klux Klan was marching, in the procession with presidents of the United States of America. The showing of Birth of a Nation was something that the White House played in on loop under the whole Geist, which really starts the root of always what has existed of Black men being these violent rapists and stuff like that. Like this relationship that this society has with Black people, and definitely that fear of a Black man is like, man, it's deep.
That's why I tell people, man, we don't need these made up conspiracy theories that we hear from these talking black heads on YouTube and all these crazy conspiracies that when you really look at them on their face value, they don't add up.
Yeah.
Like one guy was talking about Kobe Bryant was killed because they wanted the Lakers, they wanted to secure, and the Illuminati wanted to secure a win for the Lakers so LeBron can have another victory. And then he also said Big Pharma killed Kobe because they were fighting over the name Black Mamba. It's like, well, you just said two different
arguments.
Two different people killed Kobe. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Two separate groups and entities. Like, so when we do critical thinking, we can hear these things in people's conversation. We can start to see where there's enough real conspiracy going on for us to talk about.
And it ain't even real. It ain't even conspiracy.
Right?
It's
just actions. Right?
Like most of you all don't know about the non-resident tax thing, because I know I didn't before I knew.
Right.
That yes, that means that.
Yeah.
And that was 700 something million then.
Yeah.
So it's probably, as we know, billion plus now.
So when we show up with 200 artifacts to a K through 12 or a college in Nebraska or in Miami or in wherever, these are hard facts.
Yeah.
With researchable stories that not only happened, but if you do enough critical analysis, you can see. Like there's an item called a crab shackle, and they used to make enslaved people who worked in the house wear it around their ankles because it rattles. Mm-hmm. Because there were people who were enslaved were killing the plantation owner and his family in their sleep so they could escape, right? But this lets them know where they are, or if they're trying to leave at night, you could hear them leaving. So this was a tether. This was the first ankle brace. This was the first this was the first teller, right? Yeah. This was a cat bell. You got a cat bell, you know what a cat is all the time? This was a cat bell on humans.
Yeah.
Before the cat bell exist, right? So 1931, lynching the two black men in Marion, Indiana, which is only about 4.5 hours from here in the north. Public Enemy used it on Hazy Shade of Criminal album cover. There was a third man, James Cameron, that escaped to tell the story about why this white woman lied and said they did something to her and they got lynched, right? There are people with memes showing that picture in a meme saying that it was from early 1800s and it was the original Black Friday, and that's where Black Friday came from. But if you look at the clothes, you can see the clothes was from the 1900s, right? Because you had a bunch of white people partying around their feet, right?
Yeah, so like I said this before in the Seeking Asylum, the Keith Williams interview last week or whatever, like White folks were showing up to lynchings like it was baseball game.
And taking pieces of us home as souvenirs.
Taking pieces of us home as souvenirs.
And partying banjos.
Yeah, it was. You know what I mean? It was the SEC Big Saturday Weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a lot of places where the SEC Big Saturday Weekend still happens.
So we have the letter from James Cameron where he told the story. So these are researchable, hard facts, no conspiracy.
Yeah.
Like, and you can't argue an artifact's existence when it's in your hand. You can't argue. You know, there are people that say there was no color only, white only drinking signs, right? We got a few of them.
Yeah.
And some of them are heavy metal and dated in Montgomery, Alabama, or so that's why it's so critical. And no matter how people feel about the exhibit, they can't say it's a lie.
And that's what I love about it, because, you know, me, and I like that, critical knowledge, because I'm big in strengthening critical thinking skills and creative thinking skills. It's not to, and different people have a different response to it, as, you know, you're a poet. Like, I will hope that this information isn't triggering a person to say, all right, let me take up arms and start killing people. That's not that's not what this is rooted in.
Right.
It's to understand the destructive nature that naturally starts collapsing and happening in this society that does exist.
Yeah.
So if it's like watching tape on your, you know, for when I'm gonna say, so let's go to, and I'm a kid when this is happening, but Buster Douglas was watching the tape on Mike Tyson.
Oh, absolutely.
He watched the tape on Mike Tyson. I remember this fight like yesterday because my dad didn't even really want to watch it. Yeah. Everybody just assumes Buster Douglas is going to, you know, this is a fight before Holyfield will fight Mike Tyson before he may go to jail or whatever. But Buster Douglas is like, this is my opponent. This is their strengths. This is their weaknesses. This is what I'm up against. I'm going to figure out how to drop them. We're going to take him the distance, and we're going to make it happen. Because even to this day, Buster Douglas, I mean, he down there in Columbus, Ohio, training those boxers that work with him and stuff, but it's not expected. You got to know that opponent, know what we're up against, and then function. Not Mike Tyson is crazy, so let me get crazy. A lot of people tried that approach, and it was very unsuccessful.
So with the museum, we start out with the heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Right, and you're talking about going the distance.
Yeah.
So we usually start out with slavery memorabilia and racist memorabilia, but then we get into the triumphant, the celebration, the empowerment, and you know each exhibit is different. So by the time you get to the end of the timeline, you're in present day. Mm-hmm. So it's set up like a time machine, you know, chronological order. So you don't just see the hard, heavy stuff. You see the beauty. You see the magic. You know what I mean? You see all of that. Because our history isn't all what was done to us.
No.
Right? So that's why we set it up that way. And so now we have exhibits. I carry an exhibit out. Victor Muhammad from the Nation of Islam usually travels with me.
Shout out Victor.
Yep, that's my brother right there. We partners in that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Professor Griff takes an exhibit out, and Khalid takes an exhibit out. But every January, Portland brings us out for like almost a whole month. So usually Griff, Khalid, and I are in Portland. You know, Khalid and I for sure. So, but I'll let him get more into. I want him
all
to
those
get more
details.
into the.
But I love you shared that. So now we get to the very end. The classic Detroit is different questions. Mm-hmm. First car, year, make, and model, year you got.
So, I guess technically it wasn't in my name, but my grandfather passed and left, and I was driving it for a while. A gold 1977 Thunderbird.
Are you serious?
It was cold.
Oh, man. I was going to say, man, if you still had that, man, and Jay Leno would buy that for
you. In 1990, it was
cold,
man.
Man, you had a T-Bird. Oh, man. Oh.
Gold.
Oh, man. How did you finagle that from everybody else in the family, I wonder?
Man, my father eventually took it from me and let my stepbrother drive it. You know what I mean? I was like, what are you doing?
Where's the first place you went where you got it?
School.
Oh, you pulled up in school? Oh, man, you was the man.
And they were stealing those back then. The Grand Prix, the Thunderbirds, the Monte Carlos. They was stealing them joints, right? But I was like, ain't nobody stealing from me. We gonna have a problem. But yeah, I drove it to school. Yeah, it was nice.
Oh man, I can only imagine that was. And I'm guessing your granddad kept it clean too. So
He
you
did. Only thing was like the ceiling had the little cloth that, for whatever reason,
it was coming down.
drop down. So you driving with you driving with and then the seat was broke, so we had a 2x4 under the seat to keep it from going all the way back. Man,
you was riding.
It was nobody knew.
You was riding, and that was, as they say, that was real metal in those cars.
Hood was 8,000 feet long. Spaceship.
So, you're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. You get to play 2 songs, Woodward and Jefferson. What songs you playing?
End of the fireworks, Woodward and Jefferson. Whew. Man, you should have sent me that question in advance. Because there's so many. I think I'm going to have to play Woodward and Jefferson, fireworks. It's going to have to be something energetic. Is this like it has to be a Detroit song? Or
Nah, it's whatever. You the DJ.
I might play Planet Rock.
Okay, all right. You gonna have people breakdancing?
Yeah. And Boogie Wonderland.
Oh man,
Yeah.
you gonna have people partying for real.
Boogie Wonderland.
You gonna have people partying for real.
Yeah.
All right, last question. You could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
One Detroiter. My mother. Because my mother was the essence of Detroit. She was Motown to the fullest. She walked to school during the 67 insurrections. She quietly raised a family. She was the person that, even if she saw you yesterday, if you walked into the room with her today, she would make you feel like she hadn't seen you in 30 years.
Wow, that's deep.
She loved life. She loved people. And people were able to appreciate her as such. She was the embodiment of a special and beautiful human being. One of which I always hope I can be as loving to people as she is, she was, right, during her time here on Earth. But everybody in the world knew my mother.
I was gonna say,
wherever we went,
I was gonna say, for her to be a barber that long
everybody
in
knew
that era,
Stephanie Barksdale, right?
you already had to. In any good barber, you a little bit of a counselor too, because you're taking on so many personalities.
Yeah, like we always would like. My mother be like one time somebody said, "Yeah, my name is Robert Johnson." She was like, "Johnson? I know some Johnsons." I'm like, "Man, it's like
it's like that's the most common black name." Yeah, no.
She was like, "Do you know Jeffrey Johnson?" He was like, "That's my uncle." And it was like my mother was this omnipresent being in Detroit.
Hilarious.
That loved the city and loved the people and you know, she just treated Detroit right.
I love it. That's great.
Stephanie Barksdale.
I love it. All right, with that, I love it. We closing, and you definitely coming back this year because that documentary I'm interested in, and I want to put the trailer on Detroit is Different, period.
For sure. I appreciate it. Charisma Brown and a few other people, we putting it together, so we'll be back.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it.
All right.
Peace.
Thank you.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.